Chapter 1. Classification Wars. Charles sat ponderously, quill tapping furiously, as the living thrum of the library hummed around him. Cards surrounded him like fortifications, though they were about as useful as wet tissue. Classify me under M for majestic, boomed Fungus and You, a citizen's guide. The book had recently developed a god complex after Charles wrote a small glowing footnote in the margins, surprisingly thorough. Naturalism, Charles grunted, jabbing a card. No, 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 croaked the swamp atlas of the Nornfolk. Its cover curled with humidity, and it reeked of moss. It belongs under S. Like me. Swamps are natural too, you know. But you're damp, Charles muttered. All your southeast maps run together. Look, this entire section says Blorftland now. Blorftland is real. The atlas snapped. It emerged after a flood. A scroll fluttered down from above. Put me in N. For note to self. You're not a book, Charles said, barely holding back rage. I have a footnote, the scroll whispered dramatically. Footnotes have meaning. Nearby, a romance novel, Brine-Locked Hearts, leaned coquettishly against a volume of naval schematics. Shelve me near the captain's log, darling. Absolutely not, snapped the schematics. She's riddled with water damage and metaphors. Chapter 2. The Golem Blueprint. In his workshop, Charles hunched over the torso of his golem, etching runes onto its metal plating with the focus of a man threading a needle during an earthquake. Gears and wires spilled like spaghetti around the workbench. Hovering nearby, the technical manual to clockwork relationships was giving deeply unhelpful advice. Golems respond best to emotional honesty and three-point torque balance. Also, consider scented oils for long-term performance. Charles grumbled, I don't need it to love. I need it to shelve. Why not both? The manual winked. Yes, somehow. A torn book of RuneScape theory fluttered down from a shelf above. Half of its pages were missing, replaced with doodles and notes like, this isn't a real spell. Gregory owes me 5 gold pieces. Do not eat frogs whole. Charles sighed. Where's the index? Stolen by the bookworms, it said. He froze. We have bookworms again? Chronic pestilence, a plague memoir squealed from across the room. Yes, yes we do, before erupting in mad laughter and pustulant metaphors. The golem's head, just a faceless helmet atop a crate, stared blankly while Book of Artillery Curses attempted to flirt with it by offering targeting diagrams. Chapter 3. The Alphabet Conundrum. Charles made the mistake of mentioning alphabetical order during a full moon. This was akin to lighting a match in a fireworks warehouse. A is not first. Shouted, a short treatise on the alphabetical tyranny. It is merely loudest. That's what first means. Charles groaned. Meanwhile, the autobiographies were tearing each other apart. I wrote myself. Yelled, the autobiography of Captain Melvor. That's real literature. You dictated it to a scribe. Barked, memoirs of a mute bard. I used telepathy. The riddles book, bound in cracked blue leather, 1 page missing, and several answers scribbled over in ink, chimed in. What starts with B, ends with K, and is full of it? Book, Charles muttered. The book gasped. You knew. You read me ahead. You cheated. A soggy volume thudded from a shelf. I used to be an encyclopedia, it said mournfully. Now I'm 3 pounds heavier and smell like trout. Chapter 4. Golem Awakened. The golem sprang to life like an unloved automaton, waking from a bad dream. It blinked, looked around at the chaotic shelves, then intoned. Shush. That single word, spoken in deadpan iron monotone, froze half the library in shock. The romance novel swooned. The spellbook farted out a puff of lavender. Even the great big book of How Not to Die horribly paused mid-chapter. Then, the biographies started whispering, was he talking to me? I think it was directed at you. No one shushes me. I was a king. Quietus. So named on the spot by the golem itself, probably because it had seen the word in a Gothic thesaurus began to shelve. It shelved the complete guide to sand under cooking. It filed how to kill with a feather under feather dusters. And it tried to staple together 2 war chronicles into one single book called Loud History. The golem's logic, unfortunately, was based on cover color and page count. It was beautiful in its awfulness. Chapter 5. Frustration in the Stacks. Charles sat with cards strewn around him, ink smeared across his face, his robes covered in book dust, book mold, book mites, and one sarcastic corner of the etiquette of siege warfare, which kept trying to poke him in the ribs. "I have named stars with ink," he whispered. "I have opened gates to the fire between worlds. I once turned a ghost inside out." Yyth marched past holding The Use of Smoke in Whisper Magic and The Proper Candle, cramming both into the S section. A few books held quiet vigils for their missing pages. One had its last chapter replaced by a child's drawing of a duck wielding a sword. A waterlogged manual from the Age of Iron said only, "I was once dry, once respected, now I live with mildew and shame." An ancient philosophy tome, whose spine had cracked so often it now leaned like a gossiping crone, muttered, "Order is an illusion, all shelves are circular if you walk long enough." Charles stood slowly. "I'm going to eat one of you," he said. "Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but one of you is going in the soup." The riddles book replied, "What has pages but no escape, has words but no say?" Charles whispered, "The man trying to catalogue you." Chapter 6. A surprise book uprising. It began with a whisper. Not the usual kind, the gossip of autobiographies or the sultry whispers of romance novels, but a sinister, spine-tingling murmur, like parchment rustling with intent. Charles should have noticed. The signs were all there. The Atlas of Forgotten Kingdoms had started rotating itself at night. The lesser-known plagues of Yyth had barricaded itself behind the medicinal herbs section, and the index of missing indexes had grown a second appendix. But Charles, exhausted, was dozing upright with his forehead mashed against an open journal, labeled Theoretical Risks of Magic-Infused Furniture, annotated, unproofread. The revolution began in historical fiction. "They've started carding us," said Swords of the Sand Century, its pages stiff with righteous indignation. "They've catalogued us without consent," hissed the Midnight Dowry, still damp from an accidental shelving in the aquatic section. "I'm in romance," it added bitterly. "I have a sword on the cover." "It's time," murmured the political speeches of pre-imperial goats. The great page, to Turner, Rebellion. At precisely the 99th chime of Charles' enchanted clock, which sounded suspiciously like a sheep sneezing, the books launched a coordinated rebellion. They leapt from shelves, flung themselves into the air, and dive-bombed the golem. Yyth was shelved, literally. They buried him under 6 full volumes of military doctrine, and sealed him into a bookcase labeled Extremely Silent Types. A mutinous thesaurus screamed, "Banish! Eject! Oust! Unseat! Unshelve!" Cookbooks ignited a butterfire in the hearth. The Warrior's Guide to Yeast led the charge, swinging its appendix like a mace. Meanwhile, Charles woke to a paper storm. "What in the good name of footnotes is happening? We have had enough," bellowed the Atlas of Reclaimed Territories, smacking him in the forehead with a map of Yth's submerged 4th continent. A paper court is formed. They force Charles into a reading chair of judgment, stuffed with old errata and scribbled marginalia, tied down with enchanted bookstraps, and convened a trial of the cataloguer. Presiding judge, the Book of Long Delays, which hadn't been finished in 43 years. Prosecutor, the Philosophical Index of Ideas that Lead to Nowhere. Defense counsel, a small water-damaged journal with no legible title that only said HMM every few minutes. "Your Honor," boomed the index, "this man has broken our bindings. He classifies us by topic, like we are useful." The books gasped. A book of riddles threw out a dramatic one-liner. "What has brains, burns candles, and has never listened to a single one of us?" Charles, bound, groaned. "Oh, just get it over with. You are to be reshelved," said the judge. "With us?" gasps again. A fortuitous misprint. Just as the books advanced with rope bookmarks and ceremonial ink, a pop of sound echoed from deep in the stacks. The golem's hand shot out from the bookcase. "Shush," it whispered. But this time, it echoed. Across the room, multiple quietus units came online. Apparently, Charles's summoning circle had been copied in a how-to grimoire and replicated by nosy apprentices. Now, 6 golems were shushing in perfect harmony, a dread choir of order. Books began to tremble. The rebellious thesaurus shrieked, "Evacuate! Flee! Retreat! Legii T!" Aftermath. The books were returned to their shelves under heavy surveillance. Quietus was granted full librarian status, and now wore a metal medallion labeled First Spine. He also developed a taste for small jokes, whispering shelve, or be shelved to anything slightly askew. The rebellion leader, the Atlas of Reclaimed Territories, was sentenced to solitary display in a locked case with no compass rose. Charles, tired and covered in sticky page residue, limped back to his desk and burned the card catalogue. "I will classify them," he said, trembling. "But only by vibe." Chapter 7. The Secret That Lives in the Margins. The rebellion quelled. The catalogue burned. The golems patrolling. For a brief moment, perhaps 17 seconds, the living library was quiet. Too quiet. Charles noticed it immediately. Books, not gossiping. No arguing over shelf placement. Not even a poorly timed proverb from the Elvish collection. He looked around suspiciously, then whispered, "Something's off." A single book, a small nondescript almanac, flung itself off the shelf, opened mid-air, and slapped its pages down on his desk. It was silent for a second. Then, a raspy voice whispered from between the lines. "It's in the margins." The annotations awaken. The book trembled as its annotations squirmed. Years of scribbles, student notes, errant footnotes, coffee stains shaped like punctuation, moved across the page. Doodles winked. Underlined phrases ununderlined themselves. "Who wrote this?" Charles asked. The book replied, "You did, and not you. And others. We are many." A children's bestiary skittered across the floor with a pop-up raccoon flapping wildly from its center. "Margins, margins." It squealed. "They've started talking back." From the southern shelves came a terrible sound, the laughter of footnotes. The marginalians reveal themselves. Deep beneath the visible text, in the narrow spaces of thought and commentary, something ancient had begun to write back. These were the marginalians, creatures of living ink. They had no titles, no spines, no classification. Formless, free-form beings spawned from misquotes, bad metaphors, and generations of footnotes no one had ever finished. They were legion. And they were editing. Whole books were found rewritten. A History of Sand now included 3 chapters on existential despair and iguana fan fiction. Proper ladder safety for arcanists now opened with "This is a trap. Ladders are lies." A self-help book titled "You Are Enough" had all its affirmations crossed out and replaced with "Are you though?" Even Charles's own spellbook had a margin note that read, "This rune sequence smells like weak tea and self-esteem issues. Descent to the basement." With a lantern, a biscuit, and a blessed red pen, Charles descended. The spiral stair into the basement, where the worst books were kept. The encyclopedia of unfinished thoughts lined the wall, each entry tapering into ellipses and uncomfortable silence. The manual of forgotten locks clicked threateningly as he passed. And there, behind a false wall of decorative cookbooks, he found a narrow crawl space lined with old parchment and cracked leather. Each book in this hidden room was empty, but brimming with marginalia. They whispered and squirmed. A single child's primer lay in the center. It opened itself. A single line in the margin. "We are not content to comment." A brief but intense crisis of literacy. Charles sprinted back to the rotunda, trying to erase notes faster than they rewrote themselves. The golems tried to help, But one became philosophically compromised after reading a note that said, "What if books are just trees that learn to scream?" Quietus now just stands still, whispering shush in a questioning tone, shush. Resolution, by Riddle. Desperate, Charles cracked open the ancient riddles book, still mad about being guessed, and pleaded for help. The book sniffed and said, "Answer me this, you ink-blotted mule. What cannot be bound but binds the bound? Cannot be read but edits all?" Charles thought. A reader. The pages glowed, marginal ink sizzled away. Whispering ceased. Correct. The marginalians receded. For now. Not defeated, but respected. Postscript: Charles now keeps a blank notebook on his desk. Every morning, he writes in the margin, "You are seen. You are heard. Please stay inside the margins." So far, it works. But every so often, a phrase appears at the bottom of his notes in elegant looping ink. "Nice try, Charles."